I used to envy her. Not the kind of envy you talk about over drinks with a smirk and a shrug, but the kind that festers quietly, like a wound that never scabs over. They called her the perfect wife. Elegant, gracious, always with a soft smile on her lips and a calm wisdom in her eyes. The kind of woman who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. The kind men admired. And women, well, women like me secretly resented. Her name was Alina, and she was married to my best friend, Daniel. The irony? I introduced them. Back then, it felt innocent. Just a casual gathering, a few drinks, and a nudge of encouragement. Daniel had been my college buddy, practically a brother. And Alina? She was a quiet addition to our friend group. Nothing special at first, until she slowly became the center of everything. It wasn't until they got married that the gnawing began. I told myself I was happy for them. I smiled through the wedding, toasted their love, and even helped organize their honeymoon. But deep down, I watched her life. My life, if I'd only said something sooner. Unfold like a perfect Instagram reel. Breakfast in bed. Anniversary surprises. Inside jokes and spontaneous vacations. She had everything I wanted. And Daniel? He looked happier than I'd ever seen him. And me? I was stuck watching from the sidelines, clapping for a performance I didn't audition for. Still, I kept the jealousy hidden. I buried it beneath makeup tutorials, work brunches, and forced smiles. I even went on dates, trying to replicate what they had. But no one matched the ease they shared, the love that poured off them like sunlight. Until one night, everything changed. I was walking back from the parking lot behind their house. I'd dropped off a gift, an engraved photo frame for their 3rd anniversary. A peace offering, maybe. A reminder to myself that I was above all this petty jealousy. That's when I saw her. Alina, standing at the edge of the garden, alone, in the dark, crying. Not the kind of quiet tears you wipe away with a tissue, but full-body sobs, shoulders shaking, hands covering her face like she was trying to suffocate the sound. She didn't see me, and for the first time, I didn't feel envy. I felt fear. Because in that moment, the perfect wife, the one I had measured myself against for years, looked like she was breaking into pieces. And I had no idea why. But I was about to find out, and what I'd uncover would make me wish I'd never envied her at all. My name is Mia, 32, marketing director by title, emotional mess by reality. I've always been the type to organize other people's lives better than I could ever manage my own. A calendar queen, the dependable friend, the always up for a coffee girl with perfect eyeliner and an overthinking brain. I grew up believing life was a series of checkboxes. Get the degree, land the job, find the one, be happy. But somewhere between the 3rd and 4th box, I got stuck. Love, for me, has always been elusive. Not because I don't believe in it. I do, deeply. But maybe I believe in it too much. I want the fireworks and the forehead kisses, the quiet mornings and the shared playlists. I want someone who looks at me like I'm their favorite book. The problem? The people I fall for never seem to read past the first chapter. Which brings me to Daniel. We met in college, an intro to literature class that neither of us actually liked. He wore too much cologne back then and had this ridiculous way of quoting poetry, like he was auditioning for some romantic indie film. But he was warm, loyal, the kind of friend who'd show up at 3 a.m. with fries and a flashlight if your power went out or your heart got broken. We never dated. Not really. There was always this unspoken line between us. And maybe that's what made it safe. Maybe that's what made it hurt more when he met her. Alina? She wasn't flashy or loud. She didn't try to impress. She was just still, serene. The kind of woman who wore linen in winter and somehow made it look effortless. And Daniel? He fell for her like gravity. I was there for all of it. From the first shy smile she gave him at a housewarming party, to the way his entire posture changed around her, like he was trying to be worthy of her silence. And when he finally told me he was going to propose, I remember swallowing the lump in my throat and telling him, "She's perfect for you." And I meant it, or tried to, because somewhere deep down, a tiny part of me screamed, "It should have been you." I told myself I was being ridiculous, that you don't get to be jealous of someone you introduced. But every brunch we had, every dinner party I attended, every sweet social media post I scrolled past, something inside me chipped away. Still, I stayed close, because Daniel was my best friend. And Alina? Well, she became one too, in a strange, painful, beautiful way. She always made an effort with me, invited me out, checked in, gave me thoughtful gifts that made it harder to hate her. She'd squeeze my hand when I was nervous, remember the names of my disastrous Tinder dates, and once even drove across town with soup when I was sick. And yet, I envied her, not because she was cruel, but because she wasn't. Because she had the kind of love I craved, gentle, steady, and so achingly real it made me question every man I'd ever dated. I tried to be better, to silence the bitter voice in my head that said I was second best, that I was always watching from the sidelines while someone else got the love story I never had the courage to claim. But all of that changed the night I saw her crying in the dark. Because suddenly, the picture-perfect marriage, the one I had admired and resented, began to crack. And once I stepped closer to the truth, I realized that envy is nothing compared to guilt, especially when you find out the person you admired most was living a lie far worse than you ever imagined. After that night in the garden, something shifted in me. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way Alina's shoulders shook, the way she clutched herself like she was holding something broken inside. I wanted to call her, ask if she was okay. But how do you start that conversation? "Hey, I saw you sobbing alone outside your house while your husband lit candles for your anniversary dinner. What's going on?" I waited. 2 days passed. Nothing. No odd texts. No distant looks. When I visited their home again for a casual dinner, Alina greeted me with the same soft smile, poured wine like nothing had ever cracked through her porcelain exterior. But I noticed the faint puffiness under her eyes, the way she flinched slightly when Daniel brushed her shoulder. Things I never saw before, or maybe never looked for. Then came the charity gala. Daniel had offered me an extra invite. They'd bought a table for the company he worked with, and had a few extra seats. Alina hadn't confirmed if she was attending. I arrived early, more out of habit than excitement. The room was glass and gold, all shimmer and whispers. Waiters floated by with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and Daniel waved me over from across the room. He looked sharp. Perfect suit, polished shoes, easy smile. But no Alina. "She's not feeling well," he said when I asked, taking a sip of his drink too quickly. "Some migraine thing. Happens sometimes." I nodded, but my stomach twisted. Alina had never missed an event before, especially not one Daniel was hosting. The night moved on. Speeches, laughter, small talk. I tried to focus, but something buzzed beneath my skin like a warning signal I couldn't switch off. Around 10 p.m., I stepped out to the lobby to get some air, and that's when I saw her. Alina, standing just outside the entrance. Not sick, not in bed, but dressed in black slacks and a plain sweater, her hair tied back, her eyes red again. She didn't see me. She was focused on her phone, typing frantically. Her lips were trembling. I moved toward the glass doors to wave, ask what was wrong, when a man walked up behind her. Tall, confident, smiling like he knew her too well. and she hugged him, not a friendly, side hug sort of way, but full-bodied, intimate, desperate. Then he kissed her temple, and her hands stayed on his chest like they belonged there. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. No, that couldn't be right. Alina? Alina? I watched her wipe her eyes. He pulled something from his coat, a folded envelope, and handed it to her. She took it, nodded once, and slipped it into her purse like it was a lifeline. Then they parted. No kiss, no lingering touch, just a final glance. He walked toward the parking lot. She stayed rooted, frozen. I ducked behind the marble pillar near the entryway, my heart thudding like a war drum. She was hiding something, something big, and it wasn't just tears in the garden anymore. I wasn't sure if I should tell Daniel, or confront her, or pretend I hadn't seen anything. But one thing was clear. The perfect wife wasn't perfect after all, and whatever that man gave her, it was only the beginning. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Alina, hugging that man like she needed him more than air. And him, kissing her temple like it was something he'd done 100 times before. I tossed in bed, replaying the moment over and over. The way she clutched the envelope, the way she looked like she was falling apart, and somehow safe in his arms. Was she cheating on Daniel? That didn't make sense. She wasn't the type, right? But then again, what was the type? Because Alina had always been perfect, graceful, loyal, steady. And now she was lying. The next morning, I sat across from my reflection, toothbrush in hand, eyes haunted. Do I confront her? Do I tell Daniel? No matter which path I imagined, it felt wrong. I would ruin something. But hadn't it already cracked open on its own? At lunch that afternoon, I scrolled through my phone and stared at a photo from a few weeks back. Alina, Daniel, and me at their lake house. She was leaning into him. His arm was around her, their smiles wide. Perfect. But now I knew what I knew. That smile was a mask. Later that day, I couldn't take it anymore. I called her. Hey, do you have a minute? Her voice was soft as always. Of course, Mia. Everything okay? Actually, I hesitated. Would you want to grab coffee? Silence. Then, sure. Now. We met at a quiet cafe near the park, our usual spot. She looked tired, paler than usual, but her smile was still there. I watched her stir honey into her tea, her fingers trembling slightly. You look like you haven't slept, I said gently. Neither have you, she replied, and for a second I almost broke. We sipped in silence before I finally asked, Is everything okay between you and Daniel? Her hand froze mid-stir. She looked up. Why? I shrugged. I don't know. You just seemed off lately. She blinked, choosing her words carefully. Marriage is complicated, Mia. I leaned in. You can talk to me, you know. Her lips parted, then closed again. She offered a faint smile. You always look out for him. That made my heart thud. What did she mean by that? Is there something I should know? I whispered. Something you want to tell me? A pause. Then she reached for her purse, fingers grazing the side where she'd tucked that envelope days ago. No, she said at last. Everything's fine. Liar. But I didn't push. I couldn't. Instead, I nodded slowly and watched her lie to my face. Over the next few days, I started spiraling. I began second-guessing everything. The dinners, the missed calls, her sudden headaches. I even started questioning Daniel, watching how he spoke, whether he noticed her distant glances. Was I seeing cracks because I wanted to? Because deep down, I'd always felt like she didn't deserve him. Or was I trying to protect a man I might secretly still love? One night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop, pretending to work, but all I could see was that moment outside the gala. So I did something I wasn't proud of. I followed her? Just once. I waited outside her yoga studio. She walked out early, checked her phone, and drove to a small apartment complex on the east side of town. I parked across the street. 10 minutes later, he arrived, the same man from the gala, and she let him in. That was it. That was all I needed to see. Proof. But still, I didn't tell Daniel, because every time I picked up the phone, something inside me whispered, "What if it's not what you think? What if the truth was more complicated, more dangerous? What if exposing her meant destroying him?" I was trapped in a lie I didn't tell. Watching a marriage I once envied slowly implode. And every day I stayed silent. I felt like I was becoming part of her secret, part of something that might burn us all down. A week later, it happened. The moment that turned my quiet suspicion into a full-blown unraveling. It was a Friday, rainy, the kind of day that clings to your skin and makes everything feel heavier. Daniel called me. "Mia," he said, his voice low, serious. "Can you come over?" I sat up straight. "What's wrong?" He paused. "Just come, please." 20 minutes later, I was standing at their front door. He opened it looking nothing like himself, his tie loose, his eyes hollow, his posture hunched like the weight of the world had landed on his back. "She left," he said, before I could ask. "What?" "Alina. She left this morning. Said she needed space. Said not to call." He handed me a note, folded twice, with his name in her delicate handwriting on the front. I hesitated. "Are you sure you want me to read?" "Just read it." I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. The words were like tiny knives. "Daniel, please don't hate me. I didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything. I need time. There are things I should have told you long ago, but I was scared. Of losing you, of breaking us. I hope someday you'll understand. No details, no apology, just distance." Daniel slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I don't get it," he muttered. "We were okay. I thought we were okay." I didn't know what to say, because I had seen it coming. But then something strange happened. He stood, walked to their shared study, and returned holding a small envelope. "She left this on my desk. Thought it was a love letter or something, but—" He handed it to me, and my breath caught. It was the same envelope I saw her receive outside the gala. The seal was broken. Inside was a photo. A child. Big brown eyes. Curls. Maybe 5 or 6 years old. I turned it over. One word scribbled in the corner in sharp, rushed pen. "Ours." I froze. Daniel looked at me, lost. "What does that mean?" My voice cracked. "I don't know." But I did. At least I had a terrifying idea. I remembered something Alina said once, back when she and Daniel were newly married. We were at brunch, and she mentioned an old friend who had disappeared after a messy breakup. "He left me with nothing but guilt," she had said, eyes glossy, "and something I couldn't keep." I thought it was just drama, a poetic way of saying goodbye. But now, I raced home that night and did something I'd promised myself I never would. I opened her Instagram, her backup account, the one she never used except to follow art galleries and random poetry pages. And there it was, buried in a tagged photo from someone I didn't recognize. The same child, same eyes. Only this time, he was smiling at the camera beside a man I did recognize. The man from the gala. And the caption? "Father and Son Day." Everything inside me cracked. Alina had a child. His child. Not Daniel's. And she had hidden it all. The man from the gala wasn't her lover. He was her past. Her family. Which meant she had lied not just about love, but about everything. Now I was holding a truth that could destroy the man I cared about most. But how could I give him answers when the pieces didn't even make sense to me yet? And worse, how long had she been planning this escape? Because maybe this wasn't just a breakdown, maybe it was a disappearance. And I was starting to realize I hadn't been watching a woman unravel. I'd been watching a woman run. I waited 3 days. 3 days of silence. No calls from Alina. No updates. Daniel looked like a ghost drifting through his house, trying to work, to breathe, to function. And I was carrying a secret that wasn't mine to hold, but I couldn't keep it anymore. So I found her. I tracked the photographer who posted the picture, messaged him pretending to be a potential client. He gave me an address for his studio, and there she was. Alina, in a long coat, hair pulled back, standing by the window of the small loft above the studio, staring out at the city like she didn't belong anywhere anymore. I rang the bell. She turned. Our eyes locked through the glass. She didn't move for a long second. Then she opened the door, slowly. "Mia," she whispered. I stepped inside. "You lied to him." Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. "I know. You have a son." Her eyes watered. "Yes. With the man from the gala, the one you met outside." She nodded, silent. I stepped closer. "You looked me in the eye and said everything was fine. You made me feel like I was imagining things." "Because I didn't know what to do," she said, voice cracking. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand, Alina. Because right now, all I see is a woman who played perfect for years while hiding a whole life behind the curtain." Her shoulders slumped as she walked to the small kitchen counter. There was a photo there. The boy, smiling, holding a handmade rocket ship. "I got pregnant just before I met Daniel," she said, eyes fixed on the frame. "The father, he didn't want the child, said he wasn't ready. I was scared, broke, and alone. I gave the baby up for adoption before anyone knew." I swallowed hard. She continued, "Daniel never knew. When we married, I convinced myself I could start over, but I never stopped thinking about my son. I searched for years. I finally found him last year. The father had adopted him back quietly, raised him, but now he's moving abroad. He wanted me to have a chance to reconnect, before it's too late." She turned to me, crying now. "Mia, I didn't cheat. I never betrayed Daniel with another man, but I betrayed him with silence, with the life I kept locked away. I thought I could outrun it." I stared at her, overwhelmed. "Why leave?" "Because I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't sit across from him every night pretending to be whole when a piece of me was living somewhere else. He deserves someone who's not split in two." She looked at me, pleading, "Please don't hate me." I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know if I did. Hate her, that is. I hated what she'd done. But beneath all that, I finally saw her, the real Alina. Flawed, afraid, human. "I should tell him," I said finally. She shook her head. "Not yet. Please, just give me time. I'll come back. I'll tell him myself. I just need to make peace with my son first." I nodded slowly. Not because I forgave her, not yet, but because for the first time she wasn't hiding anymore. And when I left that small loft, I realized something even harder to admit. All these years, I had envied her life. The house, the marriage, the image, but none of it had been perfect. It had been stitched together with fear and secrets. And now that it was unraveling, maybe it was the first time she was finally free. Alina didn't come back for 3 weeks. During that time, Daniel broke apart in quiet, deliberate ways. He stopped going to the office, stopped answering most calls. He kept the house clean, as if she might walk in at any moment, but she didn't. And I was drowning in the weight of her truth, not mine to tell, but too heavy to keep. Then, one morning, she returned. It was raining again, like the day she left. I was sitting with Daniel, trying to coax him into eating something, when the doorbell rang. He opened it and just stood there. No words, just a long silence as Alina stepped inside. Her hair was damp, her coat stuck to her skin, but her eyes, they held something different. Not fear, not guilt, just peace. She walked straight to him. "We need to talk." They sat on the couch. I stood in the hallway, half hidden, heart pounding. I knew I shouldn't listen, but I couldn't move. "I lied to you," she began, her voice steady. "About my past. About my son." Daniel blinked. "So it's true?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at her hands. "Because I wanted a clean start with you, and I was afraid if you knew, you'd never see me the same way again." His voice was low. "You were right." She flinched, but didn't argue. He continued. "You looked me in the eyes every day and said you loved me, but you never gave me the whole truth. That wasn't love, Alina. That was pretending." She nodded. "I know." More silence. Then she pulled something from her bag. A small, hand-drawn picture. A stick figure family. One man, one woman, one little boy. "My son made this. He said it's his family now. Me and him, that's all. I'm going to live with him for a while. I want to know him." Daniel stared at the paper. Something in his face cracked. "I'm not asking you to wait," she added. "I'm not asking you for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth before I left again." Daniel said nothing, just nodded, and with that, she left. The door shut behind her, quieter than I expected. It wasn't a dramatic ending. No screaming, no shattered glass, just the quiet echo of a life falling apart, respectfully. Weeks passed. Alina sent occasional updates, photos of her son, messages that read like apologies without the word sorry. Daniel and I kept orbiting each other, unsure of what to say, what to feel. Then one evening, as we sat in his living room watching a movie in silence, he turned to me and said, "I'm glad you stayed." I looked at him. I almost didn't. "I know," he said, "but you did, even when it wasn't your mess to fix." "I'm not trying to fix anything, Daniel. I just didn't want you to go through it alone." He smiled faintly. "That means more than you think." For a moment, I saw the man he used to be. Before the heartbreak, before the lies. And maybe, just maybe, he saw me differently too. Not as the friend in the background, but as someone who never pretended to be perfect. Someone who stayed. Months passed. Alina didn't return. She enrolled her son in school, took a job in a smaller city, built a quiet, honest life. She and Daniel filed for divorce. There were no fights, no lawyers tearing things apart. Just a final handshake, a lingering look, and a goodbye. And me? I stopped being jealous. Not because I suddenly had everything I wanted, but because I finally understood. What I envied wasn't real, and what was real wasn't enviable. Love isn't about perfect images or social media captions. It's about truth, even when it's ugly, even when it hurts. Daniel and I? We're still figuring things out. There's no label, no rushing, just coffee in the mornings, long talks at night, and a shared understanding that sometimes the most honest relationships are the ones built after everything else has crumbled. And as I walked out into the sunlight one afternoon, Daniel beside me, laughter spilling between us over something stupid and small, I realized sometimes you have to lose the illusion of love to finally find the real thing.